The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life.
Hello, friends. I'm David Pasqualone, and welcome to this week's remarkable episode of the Remarkable People Podcast, the Victoria Wieck story. Victoria's story is awesome. I loved meeting her, interviewing her, and bringing this episode to you. It's going to teach you how to overcome obstacles, not quit, how to take your hobby and make it into $1 million business. It's fantastic. Victoria, her family came to America with $30 in their pocket from South Korea. You're going to see how she took that same entrepreneurial spirit and took her hobby and made $1 million business. And she shares the tips and ways that you can too. Also, this isn't someone who started a small business. She took her business from nothing to, I believe it was over $500 million. She was on the Home Shopping Network, syndicated across not just the nation, but the world. This woman has been there, done that, and is still going, and here today to share how with you. So get your pen and paper out, be ready to be inspired, and then like our slogan says, don't just listen to this great information with Victoria, but do it, repeat it, so you can have a great life in this world and an eternity to come. I'm David Pasqualone, and let's listen to Victoria's great story, remarkable story now. Hello, friends. I'm David Pasqualone, and this week's episode is with Victoria Wieck. Victoria, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Man, I'm doing great. And I want to let all the listeners know around the world how wonderful you are. For your busy schedule and my crazy schedule and all these things that happen, I think we've rescheduled this 4 times. That's a new record and not a good one. But thank you for your patience and your kindness and just how awesome you are to be here today. So all the listeners, I just want you to know right off the bat, what a great woman, how patient Victoria is. And you're going to see how much content and value she has to bring to your lives. So at this time, Victoria, I just told our listeners all about you in the intro, and now we're here. They're here for you, not me. So do you mind sharing your story with us?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this time together. And as far as us rescheduling 4 or 5 times, I just want to start right off the bat. That is a little bit of, I guess, we showed people that we had persistence and will, right? So we don't give up on anything. With that said, I just want to say, with my background, I'm going to make it very brief. I'm not normally somebody who likes to talk about myself. So it's going to be interesting. Going back, way back, since I was a little child, and it matters a little bit because it shaped a lot of things that I have done throughout my whole life, my background and my upbringing. So I grew up in a small little town in South Korea. We had a tiny little strip of beach. It was just kind of idyllic for a kid to grow up because, when you're a kid, you don't really know a lot of world affairs, especially when you're in a little isolated island like that. So I thought my life was pretty happy. We had everything we needed, but my father wanted to leave that setting and come to America because he had 4 girls. He had 4 girls and 1 boy. The boy was just born. And because at that time in South Korea, country was a little bit poor, much poorer than it is now. And there was a current of, or acceptance of treating women or girls less valuable, I guess, than boys. So a lot of the girls, when moms didn't have money or they really, really had a tough time just existing, they would give up their girls, but not the boys. So my father felt, and also on top of all that, when I remember when I was in grade school, they would tell us that if you're a girl, you don't go to college. And if you go to college, you would major in things like home economics, learn how to cook and things like that. So my father had dreamt of his 4 girls pretty much achieving whatever, whoever they wanted to be. And he said, if my girls wanted to be somebody's housewife, whatever she wanted to be, that be her choice and not the society's choice. So we came to America in search of the American dream. And lo and behold, once he landed here, he realized that all the money was kind of frozen. We didn't have billions of dollars or anything like that, but whatever he had, it was his lifetime savings. It was all frozen in both countries. So we ended up with $30 in our pocket. And, as you can imagine, life was pretty tough. $30 didn't go very far back then. It doesn't go very far today.
Yeah. Now, if you don't mind me asking, what happened that the funds were frozen? Like, why did the government do that?
So you were not, well, when you leave South Korea when you left South Korea at that time, you had to kind of give up your citizenship, and foreigners couldn't own any, assets over there. So basically, also he was in the South Korean military, very high ranking at that time. And the country was run by a military junta at that time. So if you weren't with them, then you were against them. So they did a lot of things to people who, didn't openly support them. My father was not one that was openly opposing anybody, but, they feared that. So whatever money was left there was frozen. And then the money that was sent here ahead of time, the people that actually took the money for safekeeping actually just took it. So there was nothing here. And so it was really rough, but I think what's important is that, so going, growing up there, just so that, in South Korea, it's very interesting because even today, it's about 50% Christians and 50% Buddhists, very unusual. Most Asian countries, it's predominantly Buddhist, like Taiwan has about 10% Christians, 90% Buddhist or some other religion. So, we kind of existed pretty happily there. We didn't really think about religion or anything like that. But once you got here, I went to school in East Los Angeles where things were very rough. I mean, I went to school where it was very common to see knife fights after school.
In East LA? Come on.
You don't know. I mean, that's total. Yeah, it was a lot rougher. It's interesting because I was having lunch with someone recently, and this couple, they were like, oh, so like you mean, was East LA, as the wife said, was East LA wasn't probably that bad at that time, right? And the husband's like, it was always bad. It was really bad. So
yeah, I was being totally sarcastic. We have listeners from all over the world, and some people don't know, but East LA is rough. It's very dangerous. It's not the ideal place to grow up.
No, not at all. So what happened was my father then decided that the best place for him to, because he had to work. Basically, both of my parents started working. My mom had never worked up to that point. We had, somebody who cooked for us and somebody who drove us around. It was very common in South Korea for people, even the upper middle class, to have a driver and, household help. So I kind of grew up with that, and then came here. My mom worked in a sewing factory during the day, and then she would bring work home. They had a sewing machine at home, and then she would work until like midnight because she was getting paid like by pieces, how many pieces of garment she was sewing. So basically, he realized it was pretty dangerous. And so after school, he would drop us off or make sure that we were at some, like a church environment, because he felt like that was a safe place. He had no introduction to Christianity at that time. So anyway, and I was told by everybody around me, great, amazing school teachers, there were a lot of people who empathized with our family, that the fastest way to freedom, emotional freedom and financial freedom, was to get hyper educated and to, really study hard, go to school, do all your things, and then go to college and get your dream job and climb the corporate ladder. So I did all that. So backing up just a little bit on that, when you're in that situation, you pluck yourself out of there, and then you're in East LA, and we had no money. So like my dad would come home with like one single orange instead of like a bag of it. And he would cut them in 8 sections. There were 7 of us, 5 kids plus the parents. And from that beginning, I was thinking to myself, because I was the oldest, I thought, this is definitely not the American dream that we were sold. I mean, he kept telling us it was like the paradise where all the dreams come true. But I thought about like obviously complaining to anybody doesn't help, because first of all, I didn't have any friends. You don't speak English, you don't have a lot of friends. And so I thought, what is the one thing that I could actually do? Is there anything I could do? And that thing was to learn to speak English, because, that gave you a little bit of freedom. So I, studied, basically, my father would take a American English to English dictionary, and he would circle words, and I would have to look up the dictionary. And I guess within a year or so, I was pretty good at kind of communicating, with people. So I did all that stuff. And then I realized at some point that after I got pretty decent, I went to UCLA, which was my dream school. And then I went to USC, got my master's, and I got my dream jobs. I wouldn't say it was a dream job, but I got a job with these great pay. And once I got promoted, like the second time, I realized that I was going to be doing the same thing to my kids that my parents did to me, which was my parents basically left us to kind of grow up by ourselves at that point. They had to do it because they didn't have a choice. They had to put food on the table and pay rent. But I had a choice. So I thought, what's really more important to me really was to make sure that my kids had that nurturing that I got until I was like 13 years old, until I got here. So I was willing to live on less money. And I set a goal of making like $3,000 a month, but I wanted to work no more than 20 hours a week, because I wanted to spend that time with my family. So I took a leap of faith, started this company. And in my career, just to shorten this whole conversation, I've done over $500 million in sales. And I've obviously achieved financial freedom. I live with pretty much no debt. And I spend, I would say, pretty close to unlimited amount of time with my family. With that includes my mom, and my own children and all the relatives. So that's my story.
That's a great story. And let's back up a little bit and dig in before we move on.
Yeah.
It says a lot about your family that they moved from South Korea to America. And they were obviously, the reason why they moved, was it to pursue the American dream, or was there other motivation?
Mostly okay, let's define the American dream. The American dream for our family really wasn't money that much. It wasn't economic. It was more freedom. My father saw Korea. There was like a civil war between North and South. As you know, it's the only country that's divided in half. And, they had an election, and a civilian government was put in, and then the military government took over. And I think the military junta ruled for like 20 years. And my father felt that, that kind of future, for one, where, every time you were under a dictatorship, you don't really have freedom anyway. And then secondly, society as a whole, they didn't value women, and he wanted us to live freely. So that was his dream. I didn't even think about my own American dream, but that was his dream, to make sure that the kids, especially two of us were artists. So, we were always told that artists make no money while they're living. They all make money after they die, if they make any money, and, on and on. So he basically thought that coming to America, the girls would be free to pursue their dreams. So that was his dream, and that was pretty much what he wanted to accomplish. And I'm happy to tell you that his dream actually was realized before he passed away, that all the girls pretty much do, what they want to do, and they're pretty successful at it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is not only nobility, but just huge character, because he was looking at what's best for you girls and the whole family, not just himself. So that leads to the next question. Like, obviously your dad and your mom were kind of directing the family, but you get to East LA, it's rough, it's hard. You went from a comfortable life in South Korea to a more difficult life in the US. What made them stay? because, not everybody's guaranteed to realize a dream. Not everybody's guaranteed to find that success. What mentality and thought process did your dad teach your family that kept you guys in the game and not moving back?
I remember my parents were like truly soulmates. They were married for 42 years, and they're actually, I mean, I don't remember them arguing about anything until about 3 or 4 weeks after we got here. My mother desperately wanted to go back. She said that actually she basically, we tried to look for an apartment, and in 1971, the fair housing laws didn't actually come into play, so that, when you try to look for a place just outside of East LA, a lot of the apartment owners or the managers would say to us, your girls are so pretty, and, I'd like to rent to you, but we can't rent to Orientals, for example. And it's funny, my father didn't speak English. He's like, well, what's an Oriental? Because when you're in South Korea, you don't know, all the races. Because at that time, 99% of the people who live in South Korea were South Koreans. You didn't.
Yeah.
So, but my mom just said, the gender inequality still is pretty prominent, in America. It was in 1971. And then you had this whole racial issue, which they never thought about. So she really wanted to go back, and she begged and begged to go back. And I remember her like going to sleep crying, literally, like she would just whimper, like she wasn't like, outwardly crying or anything, but I remember this. And my father actually, said we had no money to go. We have nothing to go back to, and we have to stick it out. And then, many times people that he met, like at his workplace and everything, they see us like, this family that's like a pretty wholesome, kind of naive and innocent. And they told him, like, you need to go to the government office, like a Social Security office, because we came here with the green card, all of us. So they said that you have rights and you could get some assistance. And he said, well, why would anybody want to help us? Because, we came here voluntarily. It was our choice. I chose to have these 5 kids. And basically, he didn't think that should be anybody else's burden. So he, just kept on working. And sometimes they worked a minimum of 2 jobs each. And sometimes they would have, more jobs if they had any time off. So I think what I would say is that I learned some extreme work ethic at that time. You never say, pretty much, if you gave your word, you're going to be somewhere. I don't care how tired you are. He showed up. And whatever you do in your life, you have to be the honorable person. You always have, you cannot be, even when he was teaching me how to drive a car, as we got older, I mean, we did pretty much were economically sound on our own within a few months of that. I mean, not like we were rich or anything, but we didn't have to worry about paying the $130 a month rent. But even when I was learning to drive, he tricked me, and he said, you're going to get a cop's going to pull you over if you inconvenience somebody. So like when you signal to the right or left, and he said, if you, like jump into another lane and that person had to hit the brakes or something, then you're inconveniencing that person, and that's actually a violation. That's what he told me. So I would leave like so much room before all this stuff. But so, I learned all, he didn't leave me really money or anything, but everything else that's really much more valuable, billions of dollars worth of wisdom and knowledge. I was able to take that and build my own business using those very same principles. I treat my employees really well, treat my customers well, and I never judge anybody, by the cover. And I respect every single human being. So, I think that's a great story.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And now let me ask you a question. You said back in South Korea at that time, it was about a 50-50 religious breakdown,
Yeah.
but it sounded like you weren't associated with either side. Is that correct?
Right.
And then you came to America, and there was still no, let's say, religious association, but he started sending you to Christian churches for protection, really, like after school programs.
Mm-hmm.
So did Christianity influence your life? Did it help you? Like, what happened with your family when you were introduced to American Christianity? Did it have no effect? Did it have great effect? Bringing you to today.
It's interesting. That's a fascinating question because so there are 7 of us, or my father has passed on, but there are still 6 of us still alive. I would say that a couple of my siblings have become pretty devout Christians, and they've then married Christian spouses and so forth. And I have one sister that's really, really close to me, actually is a pretty devout Buddhist, because she and my mother is still. And it's very different coming from the religion is different over there versus here. It's more of a lifestyle, how it's a belief system. So for example, you will see Korean Christians who are Korean Christians are they're very, very devoted. Okay. They're very active. They help out everybody. It's a really amazing environment. But because they were kind of raised, a lot of our cultural norms were formed with the Confucius Buddhist, kind of a way of life for 10,000 years. Those roots kind of still stay with you. And I don't really see a real contradiction, many contradictions. I mean, if you look at the 2 religions, one, and I tell you because I have family members, at Christmas time, we celebrate both Christmas and Buddhist religions, just because I've got to respect my sisters and everything. I would say that it's really respecting other people, respecting even anything that's alive, just, they have rights. And also anybody who's hurting, you actually have a duty to help them. And more than anything, just be a great listener and be curious about how you could help them. It's pretty much, I guess that's what runs through, but in my family, that's very prominent. So.
Yeah. And then what did you see? Because first off, like you said, there's no religion. It's all about a relationship with God. I mean, that's what really matters. But society,
Absolutely.
we have religion. Yeah. And if you're not watching, I'm doing the air quotes, right?
Yeah.
But what are some of the differences between that you remember Korean Christianity versus American Christianity?
Yeah, I think and I don't want anyone to lash out at me, but this is my observation. I'm always going to be very honest with you.
Yeah, no, we're not going to lash out. We're here to learn and grow from each other.
Not you, but from listeners, because I want to put this in context. As a kid, so, when I was living in Korea, we had a lot. So on the little strip of beach that we were living on, a lot of the Korean Christians, fully grown up Christians, would come there. So the weather was very much like Hawaii. It's a southernmost part of South Korea. And I watched 20, 30 people get baptized, fully submerged, on the beach almost every weekend. And I would ask my mom, why are they going in the water, fully clothed? What are they doing? And my mother would say they were the followers of Jesus, right? So I was aware of all that. So when I came to America, what I realized, what my first observation of American Christians is that they live their lives very kind of disconnected from God or from church until Sunday. Then they go to school, then they go to church on Sunday, and then they go do their normal thing Monday through Friday. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Korea, that, you are kind of in church the whole time, 24/7. Does that make sense?
Oh, I agree with everything you're saying. It's exactly what I've seen. And it's sad. That's not how God, in the Bible, from what I've read, there's not one instance where someone called themselves a Christian.
Right.
It says in Acts, they were first called Christians at Antioch. So other people would say that's like Christ. That person's like Christ. So it's almost presumptuous in pride to say we're Christian. I'm a Christian. I'm Christ-like. But yeah, I agree with you. How many people they act like, holy on Sundays, and then they act like the devil the other 6.5 days. So I'm tracking with you. And I don't think it's just America. I think it's all over the world. But I think, like you said, in South Korea and many countries, because they were denied the ability to worship, it's such a more real relationship, and it's pure.
Yeah. And I think, they have a great support system. And like I said, I I don't know why that is, but, I'm not saying every Christian is this way, but I also find that in the American, and I include some of my relatives in this, because I have a Caucasian side of the family that, I disagree with them a lot on the philosophy of what all of our relationships with God is, for example. Because, my big thing is a lot of people are so judgmental here that, for example, they're such purists when it comes to, follow God. Here's what the Bible says. Here's all this stuff for somebody else's kids or for somebody else's life. But when it comes to their own lives, they don't follow any of it. So, and they're very judgmental on small things, big things, and everything. And I'm like, you know what? Let them be who they are because they have a relationship with God themselves. And, you can't be the judge of it. They can be the judge of it. God can be judge of it, right? But you shouldn't be judging other people. For example, I have a distant relative, sometimes he comes to, my family likes to have a big gathering. They literally will invite anybody over at Christmas time. And there's this one guy who constantly talks about, oh, so and so, just he got engaged or whatever, and he's living with this girl. Like, they still have 3 months to go before their wedding, and he's this, she's that, and they're breaking all God's laws and everything else. Well, his own son's been living with some girl for 2 years. So, I don't even care if somebody's living with, it's none of my business. But it's just like when, you're going to be that pure about somebody else's life, then you also then owe it to yourself to live that life as well, right? So I just feel like a lot of times that this could, and I think this is why my one sister who still remains a Buddhist, like she sees that. She's like, these people go to church on Sunday and they think like everything they do is just completely cleansed because, they were in there for 45 minutes on Sunday. And then they come out and they basically are, signing, checks and pretty much lie to their customers, lie to their employees, they lie to everybody else. I mean, even if it's a small lie, she said, like, I don't like that. So I'm just going to say that that's my context. And I would say that on the other hand, some of the nicest people, the most selfless people, giving and, just the good of human race, I've met them at church also, but they're not the norm. They stand out. So.
Yeah. And if for everybody listening, we have listeners, like we said, from over 80 countries, Victoria, and not everybody who's listening to this has a Christian worldview. They're listening to hear like how you achieve your success and the steps to do it so they can grow. And for myself and you, we have our experiences and our worldview, but I definitely agree with everything you've said so far. And it's heartbreaking to me because no matter where we are, we're supposed to have good judgment, but we're not supposed to be judgmental. And everything in the Bible is balance. It says a false balance is abomination to the Lord. And to let everything go and to be, what's the word? It means to be accepting of everything. I can't remember the word that people always use, but that's ridiculous because you open your brain so wide. You open your mind so wide, your brain falls out. Yeah. But then to be so close-minded and judgmental, like you said, pointing the finger at everybody, that's wrong too. We need that balance. But there's almost like the freedom that God's given us, especially in America. People have just taken that to this lazy, liberal, unbiblical level. And I've never heard this said, but I refer to in my mind as religious cannibalism. It's like nothing they do is wrong, but man, as soon as somebody does something outside the norm, they eat them. They like destroy them within the walls of the church. And that's not how it should be, man. We should be encouraging each other and loving each other. And if somebody fails, you call them on it, but you still love them and work them back. And that's sadly not what happens. And I don't know if you've seen this, but in your circles, what I see in my circles down here, and it's all over, but I've noticed that if you're fake and plastic and you say the right things and you publicly act the right way, people accept you and everything's wonderful. And what a good, again, quote unquote, Christian person that is. but then they're living like the devil outside of church and behind closed doors. And the people who are real and showing their strengths and weaknesses, their good points and their flaws, those people are like crucified. Is that what you're seeing on your side of the
Oh
world?
yeah, for sure. And I think going back to, yeah, absolutely for sure. I live in California. Trust me, I see I see a lot of, you know, if you're vulnerable and you're actually really honest, you're getting attacked on both sides actually. But, you know, I've traveled, I can't even remember how many countries I've been to. I mean, I've traveled all over Middle East, all over. I mean, so I have friends, some of my best friends, I mean, they live in places like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, all these places, because I've learned to accept the human being that they are, and the goodness that they offer. I mean, we differ on some things, but on a lot of things that we believe in common are just very strong. It's just like our values, how we value our time with our children, how we honor our parents, how we honor our God. It's very, very similar. But like in here in America, I think that, who was it that years ago I left the church because I moved, but I still have a very strong connection to this church. It's a Bel Air Presbyterian. And, they would have some of because where they were, because it was right in Hollywoodville, we'd have some of the most interesting speakers, sometimes testimonials. And this guy once said, he was I wouldn't say super famous actor, but he was pretty well known. He was in many movies. And he said, I did cocaine, meth, I lied, I, hung around with prostitutes, and everybody thought I was cool. Then one day he said I hit bottom and I was in my bathtub and hallucinating the whole time. And when the paramedics got there, because somebody called him, he was supposed to be doing on some acting thing and he didn't show up. So somebody called, like broke into his place and found him in this bathtub. And he said, "Oh my God, I see Jesus." And then everybody thought he was crazy. So he said, here, when I was doing all the drugs, everybody thought I was okay. So, I mean, first of all, in many places, the norm is, there are different sets of norms. And that also goes with Christians too. In some Christian circles, it's okay to kind of like the Bible and say, I'm going to take this and this and this from the Bible to kind of fit my narrative or justify my actions. And then in other places, you're held a little bit more accountable, and somebody might call you out on that. Like, I don't get why you're doing this or that. And when you actually, I've actually been asked many times, like, not to be too vocal, and I'm not very vocal normally. I would always point things out with grace. I would say, are you sure like that's what you really meant or something like that? And they would like, wow, like, so I agree with you that we don't have the freedom to, I guess it's kind of sad that there's not a universal language within the Christian community, that in certain Christian communities you could say one thing and other places you can't say the same thing. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. And that's just the fall of man, our sin. And that's what I try to tell. I remind myself of this. So I'm not just speaking to our listeners. I'm speaking to myself. I have to remind myself often, God loves me.
Right.
God's perfect. God's without sin. God's holy. And he didn't design things this way. He's allowing it for right now. And we'll have that flawless, holy, universal, society in eternity. But right now, I just got to remember, whether it's a congregation member, a deacon, a pastor, if they're being an idiot, I might need to move to a different church if it was from like the pastoral level.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I'm giving up on God. That doesn't mean I'm giving up on the faith, the Bible. But it's sometimes like, and I think it's biblical. I'm going to say this, and people, I don't want to misrepresent it, but for you might be the same. You can disagree with me, but the people that if somebody doesn't believe in God, I'm totally fine with that. If someone's a
Right.
strong Christian, I'm totally fine with that. But it's the hypocrites I
Yeah, I
physically want
agree.
to shake or slap in the face. And when you read the Bible, that's how Jesus was. Anybody who attacked him, he was fine. But when they attacked God, he lost it. And when there was the hypocrites, the scribe, the Pharisees, he called them snakes and vipers. So we have tolerance. That's the word I was looking for. We have this religious tolerance that's complete BS. Like, we're supposed to respect each other and love each other. But if somebody is just flat out wrong, if somebody molests a child, screw you. That's not okay.
Yeah,
you deserve to be beaten like a piñata and probably taken off the planet. It's not murder. It's killing. It's, you reap what you sow. So that's where I'm at. And we're kind of getting deep into this, but I thank you for, your perspective. You have South Korean perspective. You have, like you said, the West Coast perspective, and there's great wealth there for the world. And, the church, if I say church, you're going to get an impression in your mind. I have an impression in my mind. All the listeners across the world, that word is so powerful. It could be positive or negative.
Right.
But we got to do what you said, is go back to, you didn't use these exact words, but what's real? What did God really design? And how should we be? And we're not supposed to be Sunday Christians. We're supposed to be Christians every day.
David, even more than that. What's really sad is that the Sunday Christians are praised for going to church every Sunday, because in my church, I volunteer. I get kind of drafted a lot for like art committee, stained glass committee, all these things, where we have to then raise the money and design them and put them up. But, at our church, our attendance every week is like maybe 1,000 people. So, 2 services, about 500 people. And then Christmas and Easter, they go to like 4,000 people. So you have Christians who are Christmas and Easter only Christians. So, and yet they're like, really the loud and judgmental kind on top of that too. So I would say that I'm with you on that. Like, I know great people. Great people, because in my business, I source merchandise from, I do gemstone mining and all that. So, 23 African countries. We've got, all of South America, Central America, all of China, India. I know people who are like in China, for example, you're not allowed to have a religion. So if you're a Christian, you don't dare telling anybody that. But a lot of them don't know. I met amazing Chinese Muslims who have never been to like a mosque, or they don't even know why they are. It's a fascinating story. Like I actually went to Beijing to do business with a very, very big jewelry store chain. And it turns out it was about 60% owned by the Chinese, Communist Party or something. Anyway, I don't get into politics. I was, the lady, Mrs. Wang, tried to get me out to, dinner. So I accepted the invitation, and she said to me, this is the most famous Muslim restaurant in China. So I assumed she was Muslim, right? Why would she pick out a Muslim restaurant in the middle of China? So, I asked her, so like, are you a Muslim? And she said, oh, no, and I said, well, how do you know about Muslim food? She goes, I don't even know if it's a Muslim food or not. And most Muslims here in China don't know why they're Muslims or anything. It's just that during that whole Silk Road time, when, Persian rugs and spices were being, transported, it was right through this particular town, and they married local people. So, the point I'm saying is that these are wonderful people, and, they don't know God. They don't know Christianity. They don't believe in, any religion, and they're good people. They don't judge you. They don't do anything. But when we have Christians in this country that go to church on Sundays only, they don't volunteer to do anything. And yet they're sitting there judging everybody else and everybody else's kids and every other person they never even met. They saw somebody on the news, and they'll, go on a rant for about an hour. That's not acceptable. I feel like that you can use that time to do something more productive. If you, that's my whole thing. Like, my thing is, when things got so tough, and when I was like a young teenager, and I had 3 jobs, I was like on the bus, taking the bus. And I would tell my dad, like, this whole idea of the American dream that you had is really, that's what that is. It's a dream. It's never going to come true. And, my father would say, and I don't know at that time, because my father kind of was teetering around Christianity versus, he was very fascinated about the two different religions. And he said, if you have time to bitch about something, if you have time to complain, if you have time to sit there and argue with me about anything that's wrong with your life, you have time to then figure out what your purpose in life is on this earth. And it's time for you to, it's the amount of time, every single minute you waste, bitching at me about your life is the time you're wasting improving yourself. And I mean, that was pretty harsh, but I think it's true. So I would say to everyone listening, honestly, like I said, some of my greatest conversations I've ever had were in places like Dubai with a Jewish woman and a Muslim woman and a Christian woman, talking about the common bonds that we had. It's just really amazing, when you have great people trying to, solve immediate problems with a kind heart, with love for not only for yourself, but also for others. I'm going to tell you an example of something that is just so hypocritical and the person who said it didn't even realize it. And I didn't point it out to him because it was just so foregone. But I have a friend, my daughter's best friend, her name is Julia. She came over for my daughter's bridal party when she was getting married several years ago. And there was all these other people there. And there was one couple, young couple, that actually held a Bible study supposedly every Wednesday. And it was right around Easter time, and everyone asked everyone else, what are your plans for Easter? And, everyone went around the room and said, oh, we're having so-and-so over or whatever. But this one guy who held a Bible study, he asked her, what are your plans for Easter? And now Julia is not a Christian. She basically is an atheist, let's put it this way. But she said something like, I think I booked myself to go and help out at the homeless shelter in Los Angeles. And so I'm going to be serving meals at the LA mission. And this guy said, why? Like, he was really confused why she was out there helping out. And she was like really shocked. And she was like, oh, she goes, well, because it's a really kind thing to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
That was a conversation. I was like, whoa. But yeah, I would say, and especially in workplaces where I was, I'm on TV every month. And in my previous network, I was hooked up to like 180 million homes around the world. And so, we went through times where we weren't allowed to sell any religious articles, including crosses. So it's really interesting. But whenever I would design a cross, I would tell a beautiful story about that particular cross. And, like why that cross looked that particular way, for example. So I don't have a sample of it here, but I wish I thought about it. But it's all princess cuts, all square princess cut stones. And at the very bottom of it, there's like a pear-shaped stone. And I said that something like, when my father passed away, I'm around my father's anniversary of his death, I'm always reminded of the things that he said to me, when things got really rough in East LA, that life isn't about how long you live. It's really about the moments of joy that you create for other people, tears of joy. So I created this cross, and it was titled Tears of Joy. And, I sold like $1 million worth of it, like in an hour. That thing just went like that.
Wow.
So, because it came from the heart and it had an amazing story, it was beautiful. And then I will go through 3-4 years of not designing any cross, because I wanted to be very worthy of it. And I would tell my audience that, I'm a businesswoman and I understand the need, to make things, but I have not done a Star of David because it is a religious article, and that it, whoever believes in the religion deserves to get it from somebody who had the heart in it, who understood them, who had, some inspiring moment to do that. And I don't think I was qualified to do that. But when it comes to crosses, I wouldn't bring something unless I actually had something to, show. Or sometimes I'll listen to a sermon from, there's certain sermons that like kind of hit you, like you feel like they're talking to you in your life. And I would sketch it right there, and it would come to life, and I would bring, actual drawings with me. and they've sold pretty well. So like I said, I try not to make it about making money really, but more about telling that story. So, and I think that that thing my father said about creating, not experiencing tears of joy, but actually creating them for other people. He died shortly after. He died at age 66. So in his case, that was actually quite relevant, I would say.
And that's so beautiful and sweet. And to think about, to spend your purpose, you can
Right.
do it in any way, creating joy. You don't have to be a public figure, or you don't have to be a preacher, you don't have to be a politician. You can just be you. You can be a janitor, you can be a salesperson, you can be a corporate executive, you can be a teacher. But every day we can create joy for others. And when God fills us, and then
Yeah.
it overflows to the world. And that's the intended model. That's what the Holy Spirit does if we allow it, if we keep our lives pure and allow it to happen. So
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. And the other thing too is that, for all of you listening, especially in, countries where you don't get to actually own a Bible or worship or anything. It's interesting. When I flew into China the first time, many, many years ago. So I went from, I have a global business. I've got a business in, I think 30 some countries now, at 35 or 40 countries. And so you're traveling all over the place. So when I went to, I guess, Bahrain once, at the airport, they actually check your bags and do all this stuff, and they look for videos. They're looking for things like porn and stuff like that. They don't want that in there. So they look for drugs and videos. And so I had a little bag that looked like it could be like a video camera. And so they confiscated it, and they returned it a few days later. But then when I went to China, they actually will go through your whole bag, not for drugs or videos, but they go through your bag looking for books. They'll go, if I'm an avid reader, I love to read. And if you bring in 2 or 3 Bibles, they'll confiscate that. Okay. So basically, there are a lot of countries where Christianity is something that you don't know, but you want to get to know, but you have no way of getting to know it. But what I want to say is I have been to, so not only just countries, but I've actually had meaningful philosophical conversations with women, especially, I remember one time I was sitting on this trip in Bahrain, because a couple of women actually helped me out. One woman was completely covered up and one was not. And I asked, what is their actual, I understand theoretically, covering up and all that, but how practical is it? And what does it actually mean here, in this country, when you're here? And it's really interesting how when you have the curiosity and you try to learn, a little bit, the amount of respect you actually get from that, because their idea of a Christian woman was completely kind of demystified, because when they look at me, I'm Asian, and they assume that I wouldn't be a Christian. And then not only that, I never talked about this. So remember, a lot of these people I do business with for years until I meet them. And then when we were out there off business hours talking about, our families, our lives and all that, our religions come in just because some of them go to church on Saturday and some of us go on Sunday, some don't go at all. So I would say that, just respect everybody. And when you have things that are really unbearable, because a lot of women in many of these countries, and you might be making $50 a month or something, and you don't have a lot of means, and something bad happens to you, and a lot of bad stuff, like I said, we had economic freedom, all that stuff taken away. I would say, sit back a little bit instead of bitching about things and about what's wrong with the world and what's wrong with your life. Think about where is a gift in this? Because everything that happened to me, that if my father were alive today and you asked him, what is the one thing other than having your daughters, and your wife, what is the one thing that you are more grateful for than anything else? And he would say to you, having everything taken away, stripped away, except the $30 was the greatest gift, because that, you start from nothing all over again. And it's just such a sweet journey, because by the time he died, I mean, he became a doctor here. He got his commercial pilot's license. He got all this stuff, and his daughters all became, really, really well balanced human beings. So he would say that wouldn't have been possible if he was like content sitting in South Korea, ordering people around, because that's, he had a pretty cush life. So you have to think, like, where's the gift? Because if you look hard enough, with every disaster, with every horrible thing that you think is so devastating, it comes wrapped with some gift. And sometimes that is much more precious than what you lost. Oftentimes it is.
Yeah. That's very well said, and so much needed in our society. For the listeners, they've heard how your parents hustled, you've hustled, you've worked hard, and we're going to talk about where you've, from where you are been to where you are. But before we dig into that, the last question is, not last question, but the question right now, no matter where somebody is right now, or no matter what they're doing, what tips or steps have you taken to preserve being real, to preserve just being who you are, being honest and true? Because there's a lot of people, and again, quote unquote, Christians included, who believe a complete lie that if you're going to be successful, you have to lie, steal, cheat. When I've seen the opposite, the most honest, moral people are the people who are the most successful. I mean, you always have these idiots, and I'm not going to bring up names, but our Congress is full of them right now. But most people who are successful that I know are great humans. So what from someone working in a fast food restaurant, to someone working in a clerical environment, to someone working as a C-suite executive, and everything in between, construction worker, teacher, anything, what do you have for them in the sense that helps you stay the course each day and be real?
I heard someone speak about, and the title of the speech was something like, everyone lies. Okay. Employers lie to the employees lie to the employers, recruiters lie to both of them, you lie to customers. I mean, there could be little lies, right? But I would say that if you are a small business owner, or you dream of being one, or you are working at a company and you feel like all the liars and cheaters are always getting ahead and you're not, just think about this one. Human beings were not ever supposed to be born perfect. Life isn't perfect. I think the beauty, and I'm sure most of you listening will agree, that beauty of life itself is the journey of discovery. And you don't have the discovery when everything is just so hunky-dory and everything just seems so perfect. So I would argue the most perfect family, the people who said, I got the perfect family, the most perfect whatever, is the most dysfunctional, because you've never actually worked through anything. So the thing that, if you are starting a small business, because that's what I actually empower people to do, and I will go into why I believe that everyone should own a business, is this: if you're already in the small business, you're not going to ever be competing with the Coca-Colas or the IBMs, or the Kroger supermarket chain, or Kentucky Fried Chicken, or whatever. Your advantage in life is going to be your authenticity and your vulnerability. Okay. Nobody wants to watch perfect people all the time. I mean, look at it this way. When you open, any papers or Instagram or whatever you get your news from, you often see these people that supposedly they look perfect, they're gorgeous, they got great hair, great skin, great body, great boyfriend, great, husband, great kids. And yet they're miserable. Their whole lives about, the fourth marriage gone array or whatever is all out there all the time. So, not only in America, in every other country, we root for people who have flaws, who have problems, who work through those. And with dignity and grace. And along the way, you discover something and help people. This is the joy of life. So I would also argue with you that the term success is really distorted here in America. In Asian cultures, many Asian cultures, I know this is true in my family and the small little village where I came from, success is defined not by money or wealth or fame, but it's defined by five things that combined. It's the balance of them all. So the first in that whole order is your relationships, the quality of your relationships. So if you don't have a relationship with your kids or your parents, that's a problem. So relationships is one. Wisdom, not necessarily intelligence, but just wisdom to know what's right or what's wrong. And then you have health. It's another big thing. And then you have wealth, of course, that does buy some things. So when you have all these other things and longevity, because a lot of people actually, die pretty early. So if you have, a perfect balance of, and I say why that balance is really important is that how often do you see people who, become a millionaire or deca-millionaires, 10 million or more, but they've had to go through 2 divorces. Their kids don't, kids hate their guts, and or you haven't seen them, or you don't talk to your siblings anymore, or you have tried doing all those things and you get sick, for example, or there's just human beings weren't supposed to have one huge thing and at the expense of all the other stuff. So having this balance is really important. So why I say this now to you is if you're, waiting tables, if you are, a photographer struggling, if you're doing whatever you think I'm not successful and I'm not going to ever be successful, trust me, you already have so much more success than you ever think was possible.
Yep.
So if the only thing left there in the whole, spectrum of things that I just mentioned, if the only thing that's left there is money, that is the easiest thing. And that's how I specialize. I actually will teach you how to make money once you have all the other stuff. But I refuse to take people who basically think the money is the only thing. So, you know what I mean? Did I make any sense?
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think, again, that lines up with the Bible. In the whole Bible, the word success is only mentioned once in Jeremiah. And it gives this whole beautiful passage. It says, then thou shalt have good success.
Right.
But in America, most people, Christians or not, they hear success and they equate that with wealth.
Yeah, exactly.
Success equals wealth in America, and that is not true. There's so many successful people around the world, but they're not enjoying it because they're like, I'm not wealthy, so I'm not successful. Well, that's not true. You can have a great marriage and a great family. And like you said, all these other things, and the wealth is the least of it.
Right.
And then the wealth is actually the easiest to get. Like, I'm like you, when I consult people to help them grow their business, so many are focused on, oh, I need investors or money or this or that. I'm like, that's the easiest part. I'm like, when we get your foundation laid and everything else in place, you're probably not even going to need an investor. But if you do, they're going to be flocking to you. We just need to get you structured right. But the money is the easiest part. And that's what people are lied to. And they believe the myth, exactly like you said, that's the hard part. And it's not.
It's not. But you know why? Because relationships, you have to actually work at it continuously. Relationship, human beings have emotions, and life happens, things change. So relationships is difficult because you have to constantly work at it and constantly, take out the weeds and, in your relationship. And it's something that takes effort all the time. Having your health, same thing. You have to kind of take care of your body, inside and out, mind and body. But I will say one more thing. If you have all these other things, so there's something called the temporary wealth. Okay, so you might become a millionaire, but how many times have we seen companies go bankrupt? I mean, look at companies like Blockbuster, Montgomery Wards. I mean, even bigger companies, they used to be the biggest thing in the world, and they're nothing today. Like nobody even remembers them anymore, right? It's same thing with people. Like a lot of times you get this flash of money, and when you don't have relationships, when you don't have all these other things, it's harder to sustain it. It's much harder to sustain the wealth or the momentum or whatever you've got going. It's so much easier. Life is much more enjoyable and fulfilling when you work on all these other dimensions of your life. So I would argue that having this relationship, I have a wonderful, wonderful husband. I've been married to him since 1989. So I don't know, it's 30 some years. And I've got great kids. My parents, they sustain me. That when times are tough, and you will have tough times, they would always say, if anyone can do it, you can do it. And they would be the few times when you're like self-doubting and all that, they would say, you know what? God didn't put you on earth so you can starve or suffer. You're going to find your purpose and you're going to get this done. And, sometimes that's all you need. But when you have people hating your guts because, you cheated them and all that stuff on your way to making the $1 million, I mean, they're just waiting for you to fail. And that's a horrible way to live. You know what I mean? Even if you had all the money, it's a horrible way to live. So, and I am living proof. I went from $30 to $500 million without outside, investors ever, and with less than $10,000 worth of advertising. I haven't spent money on advertising or doing anything like that. I'm not saying I'm a superwoman. I'm just saying that these things are possible when you work on everything else first.
Yep. And let's get into that. I know you don't like talking about yourself, but that's why we're here. They want to hear about Victoria Wieck. So take us from when you go to college, you said you had your great paying job. Take us from there into where you are today. How did that journey go, your career, your success? Like you said, now you have, you've been over 180 million homes, 500 million plus in sales, gem mining, you're in 35 to 40 countries. So bring us from where you started to where you are today.
So I think this is, I don't like to talk about me so much because David, I have lived my whole life on, when I went to graduate school and in business schools today, and business schools, from the time the business schools were invented, the MBA classes always tell you that the most effective words in marketing are free and new and improved. I'm sure everybody has heard that before. This is why we always you get free this, free that all the time. And I say that the most important word in marketing is the word you, Y-O-U. So I always really thought about this from the very beginning of my career. So when I first started my company, I went to work for someone, and so the jewelry industry is so archaic and so stubborn, even to this day. When you buy anything, try to go buy, your mother, your sister, your daughter, anybody, a necklace, for example, they come in this very predictable lengths, 18, 20, 24, and 30 inches. Okay. They don't make anything other than that. They basically have this industry standard. And I said, well, why, when I look at all the women around me, the most usable size were like size 17 inches or 16, not 18, 20, 24, 30. And what happens if somebody wants like, a 15 and a half inch necklace? What do? And they told me, well, it's a lot easier to keep track of our inventory. And, we can't stock like all the different sizes. So these are the standard sizes that we get things from, right? Same thing with if you wanted to buy a ring in America, there was a time, and still 80% of the companies do this. All the rings that are stored in all of American, everything from Zales, K's, because I sold to all of them at one point, they stock them in size 7. So if your daughter, for example, wanted a size 5 ring, you would have to get it sized. They would tell you, they would, charge you a special charge fee for sizing it down to her size, because, she committed a crime of wearing a size 5. So I asked my boss, like, why don't you offer, like in bracelets, which was a huge category for him, instead of offering only one size in size 7, because I don't know anybody who can wear a 7. My Asian side of the family, they're all like 6 and a half at the most. And then my Caucasian side of the family was 7.5 to 8. So no one in my family could actually wear a 7, including myself.
But that's the most popular size.
Yeah. So I kept asking if he would offer them, because it would just simplify it, okay, for the customers. So what happened was he did it. Just by offering these extra sizes, he actually pretty much owned the market at the time. He pretty much increased his sales in that category by 25%. No new designs or anything, just adding these other sizes. So, time after time, I would ask him to make little tweaks to make our customers, just make it very, very convenient for them. They should be able to go in and buy what they want and leave. They shouldn't have to come back 6 times to get a size, right? And pay more money. So, and then I asked him to do some other things, and he said pretty much same thing. He didn't really want to deal with the inventory, didn't want to deal with, whatever. So I went out and started my own company. And when I started my own company, this was really, I didn't have money, David. I didn't even have money to make a simple sample. Samples cost a lot of money. So I know you're in business. If you wanted to make a sample of, a Scent to Glory, for example, briefcases or something like that, basically the manufacturers will tell you, we want a logo, we want a die stamp, we want this, that. It costs you thousands of dollars just before you actually envision what you are envisioning. So I didn't have any money, but I wasn't going to give up. So I actually sketched out my designs. In fact, I'm pretty good at sketching. Let me show you. So like this is a 3D picture of a design.
And for those of you listening right now, I'll put a link in the show notes. Victoria, you can send me a still shot, and then that way they can see them too.
So I sketched them out. And
wait, actually hold that back up for the camera. I was too low.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah, beautiful.
So I sketched them out, and I would basically, there's a whole bunch of them. I sketched them out, and then I would, oh, you're going to love this one. This is one of my favorites. This is like basically rocks and a starfish like crawling around the rocks. You see that?
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
So I would sketch these out, and then I created like lookbooks. Then I went to department stores like Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue, Bloomingdale's. We had Saks and Neiman's in LA. Bloomingdale's wasn't there yet, but at that time it was Bullock's, basically. That's what Bloomingdale's became. And I went to department stores, and I'd ask the assistant manager, if you had something like that, could you sell it, and how much, could you sell it for? So, and I would tell them, like, I'm just doing some research. I really dream of owning, again, some kind of a design studio, but I don't have any money. And I was, just trying to see if I can actually, get some feedback from potentially, I don't know if this is going to work or not. And, you cannot believe how many of those people that I approached saw this innocent girl. I mean, remember, I was 30 years younger. Innocent girl, vulnerable, completely honest. I have no money. Okay. But I was eager to please people. Do you know that the Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue on Wilshire and Rodeo, because they're right across from one another, they're like, oh my God, they're beautiful. And yes, we can sell a ton of it, and we can sell it for a lot of money. And I said, well, how would I go about doing that? How would I go about finding them? And they're like, no, they're our best customers. So if you leave those designs here, we will call them and ask them to, because they don't want to buy whatever's in the case. They want to know what else is coming up new. So my first few pieces, these people actually sold it for me. Just being, but had I gone there and said, oh, I'm the award-winning designer from, whatever land, and, these are gorgeous, beautiful, do you want it? I don't know if I would have gotten the same, same kind of response, but, a lot of people, but I knew even at that time that the Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills wasn't, like all of America. So I went to much farther out, places like, in the San Fernando Valley, Orange County, more inland. And I went to all the stores that I can and asked them the same question, could you give me some feedback? I understand that you have some, great contact with your customers. And so that's how I started my company, by really like respecting the customer's need, and also just working with, asking people for help and being authentic and vulnerable, just letting people know, hey, I have no money, and, I would love to start something, but, this is the only way I can start. And so I think that, to me, when I look back, that's still the most astonishing thing, because I was able to start a business with literally no money.
And how did that come about? I remember you telling me that privately. You told me a cool story. Can you share that with the audience, or is that private story?
I don't remember what that was.
You were saying how your first real big break, you were in an office and just the right person at the right time came by.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that was the beginning. And, I've had many, many moments where I have had some just really amazing moments that just kind of happened just out of nowhere. So I started my company that way. And then so I did get my big, I was able to get into Neiman's and Saks and all the different companies. And I kept getting this phone call from this woman named Mary Lou. I don't know if Mary Lou's still like within the company or not, but Mary Lou was the civilian buyer working in El Toro Marine Corps Base. And she said, oh my gosh, like I see your, designs all over these magazines. I see them, all over the airline, because I was in all the airline in-flight magazines as well. And I would love to have it in my PXs, but so I noticed that you're based in LA. So LA to El Toro was only about an hour drive. So she had asked me if I could show her, my designs. And I kept, saying, well, I don't know anything about like military bases. I haven't been in one. And I'm one of those people, if I really don't think I can help somebody or be a good fit for them, I would just tell them right off the bat, like, I'm just not very good at this. I'll just tell them that. So, but I didn't know enough about it. But one day I was going home to my husband's, so my in-laws, my husband's mom, to San Diego, and El Toro happens to be right in the middle of the two cities. So I told her, I'm sorry, it's Thanksgiving weekend, but on Wednesday, I'll be driving towards San Diego, and would you mind if I stop by and kind of checked out your store? And she said, oh, not at all. So I went there Thanksgiving Wednesday, and right about noon, she looked, I mean, her eyes were just like sparkling everywhere. She really wanted to buy all this stuff. And she had all, I love this. And she picked it all out. And then at the end of the whole thing, she said, the only problem is, I forgot to mention, is that I can't buy anything. I can't, give you actual PO. I can only sell things on consignment or guaranteed sale, which means that, I've had to kind of finance the whole thing. And so, I said to her, I really wish you had told me that like from the beginning, because I'm such a small company and I'm not in any position to take any risks like this right now. And then she told me, you're dealing with the US government, so you are not taking a risk. I mean, we will pay you for sure. But I still said, if you choose certain things and it doesn't sell, I'm still going to have to take those back. So that's still a risk for me. And I'm not able to take any risks at this time. I'm such a very small company. I can't handle this, So I wasn't mean about it or anything like that, but we chose to speak again at some point, and I started to pack up my merchandise, and everyone, all of a sudden around the room, like they just got up and, stood erect, and they saluted this man that walked in, and he was a colonel something from, a pretty high ranking. He was there to meet some general. And so, of course, I don't know anything about any of this stuff. And everyone saluted except me, because I didn't know the protocol, right? And I didn't know how to properly salute anybody. So I'm standing there kind of frozen. I stood up. And, obviously, this man was not in jewelry at all. So he's seeing all this jewelry, over there. He's like, what is all this? And so Mary Lou said, I was hoping to be able to get this in the PX stores, but I'm not able to because, she explains all this. And he actually came in looking for someone, and he was lost because this guy was not, he didn't work in the space. He was a visitor. So he basically said, how much would it cost to, stock this or test this? And I said to him, I could do this for maybe $25,000 if that's all the money, we had. Or if normally I'd like to have like $75,000 because, we can then test all the different categories and so forth. And he just basically said, so you're definitely not a Marine, or you don't know how the Marines work. And I said, no, sir, I don't. Of course I have to be very honest. And he said, we're the Marines, and if we do something like we do it right, or we don't do it at all. And so he basically said, he's going to get together with this other guy that he was supposed to meet, and they're going to just go ahead and give me a $75,000 blank PO to test this, because he loved it. Now,
oh, so awesome.
So the question is, and this man, was like the high ranking officer, And he normally would never come to this particular base, but he had to meet a bunch of different people, and he was lost right at the moment that I was packing up the stuff, right? And so, like, what are the chances of all of those things happening at that very 2-3 minute time period? And of all the times Mary Lou had called me for 2 or 3 years, that I would have chosen that Wednesday, right, where this guy was visiting. So I would say, and then, by the way, I did get into the El Toro Marine Corps base. She then introduced me to, we developed an amazing relationship. She then introduced me to the bases down in San Diego, at Miramar Naval Air Station, Pearl Harbor. And then those people sent me over to Henderson in Maryland and Norfolk, Virginia. So I was in all these stores. I mean, there were millions and millions of dollars worth of merchandise that went through. And, people love them. So I guess, there were so many instances like that in my life where just when I needed that extra something, it just appeared. So I would say that, I would argue that, I've always lived my life. So going back some more, I don't want this whole show to be about my dad, but my father used to say, when we were really poor in East LA, and then we were just out of East LA, we kept on moving, further and further away from there. But sometimes he would see people, homeless person, like with a couple of kids begging for money. And he would just kind of empty out his pockets. And my mother would say, like, are you crazy? We have no money. And, sometimes it'd be $20, sometimes it'd be $50, but he would just empty out his pocket. And he said something like, if you give him $1 or $2, it doesn't change his life. It doesn't change your life. It's just like a feel-good money. You're trying to, like, wash your consciousness off, like, by saying you're doing something good, but you haven't really made any sacrifices for that. But if you give them everything you have, it now costs you money. That's charity. So I would say, I've always, if anybody ever asked me for help, I've always helped them. So, and he always said, if when you help somebody who's homeless, when you help somebody, who's a drug addict or whatever, that person may never even remember your face, but when you need help, it will come to you. Mm-hmm. And it was. So
yeah,
that's very powerful. To me, that was really powerful. And I think that there has been many times in my career, and I think getting into those PXs where they added a whole other dimension, because they were pure cash flow. And I grew, like, my company grew, like, exponentially that 2-3 years, because I was in all the Marine Corps bases, Army, Air Force. And, they paid like clockwork. And that was a pivotal moment that didn't cost me a penny or money or anything. So I would say I've had many of those sort of divinely aligned moments in my career.
Yeah, and God has definitely given you wisdom and favor, but you did the work to, when he gave the open door, you went through it, and then he delivered. And it sounds like your dad was a super wise man and somebody great to learn from. And yeah, that's it. When you were speaking about your dad and his philosophy on giving, it reminds me of the difference between, everybody can have knowledge and we can learn.
Yeah.
But then there's wisdom, and it's knowing how that works. But then understanding is actually applying it.
Right.
And that's just beautiful how your dad didn't just give you the knowledge or the wisdom, but he gave you the understanding. So God gave it to you through your father. So that's so awesome. So let me ask you this, Victoria. From your career to today, is there anything significant we missed, or anything you want to cover, or anything you really want to share or impart with our audience before we move on to where's Victoria today and where are you going?
Yeah, I think the thing I want to leave and conclude with for that section of our interview is that, remember, love is an action word, right? In fact, I think that everything you do, everything you believe in, if it's not followed by actions, then it's meaningless. So remember, when you preach to anybody about Christianity, about charity, about anything, follow that up with meaningful action, not just any action. Just like this whole thing with the homeless person, he used to also make us pick out our favorite things that we wanted to have for Christmas, up to a certain budget. And because we didn't have, there were many years we didn't have any money. And then when Christmas came, we didn't get to keep it. He made us go pick out a kid and give it to them. So, that sucked, but that was charity. Like what he's saying is that when you're a multi-billionaire and you write a check for $50,000, he doesn't recognize it. It's like, it means nothing. But if you make $500 or whatever a week, and you choose to give away the $50, that's actually quite meaningful, because that means you can't buy something because you gave it to someone. So I would say that everything you do, believe in yourself. And I said to myself over and over, every single time my business came to a fork where you either move forward, you had a chance to just like really catapult your way up higher, or go bankrupt. And I had to take certain risks. And, sometimes it looks like I was going to go bankrupt. I reminded myself, God didn't put me on earth so I could sit here and starve. He didn't put me on earth so I could come this far, doing all the right things in my life. I mean, just giving my heart and soul to everything that I believe in. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I mean, I'm still flawed. I create real screw ups in my life every day to now. But still, he's not going to abandon you. You have to keep charging. And if you believe that, sometimes it's really hard to believe it when you see no, I would say something like false evidence. A lot of times it looks like you're failing, and you're not. You're just doing the right things. So I would, if you are having a hard time in your life, in your marriage, in your, journey of health, or your business journey, the first thing is belief, and then the second thing is the action. That what are you willing to do to kind of validate the belief?
Yeah. When you said false evidence, the first person I always think of is Abraham Lincoln. That guy thought he was a failure when he died, and yet he was one of the greatest presidents and leaders of all time. And then you have, so much wisdom in what you're saying. It sounds like your dad, again, just lines up with the Bible, whether he believed in Christ or not at that time in his life. He taught you give your best. It sounds like you don't give the scraps. Like, how many times do we say, oh, I'm going to give a little, and it's like nothing, or we're going to give something we want to get rid of, so we have an excuse to go buy more crap, right? It's like, we're so shallow.
David, what's worse is I know people who make, upwards of $50 million, and they'll, give away $1,000, and they'll go talk about it to everybody. That what a giver they are. That's not good. So
that's why. The biblical model is perfect. It's God never, first off, it's like, what a lot of people call it tithing, but that's a percentage of your income. And that's just to show an appreciation to God. And he doesn't need our money, but it's just to say, wow, God, thank you for the other 90%. But whether you make $1 or whether you make $100 million, it's a percentage. So it still has value. It's not like you said, if somebody makes $50 million, $1,000 check is nothing. They'll spend that on dinner.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If that, I mean, maybe lunch.
Yeah. They'll buy a bottle. I've been with people that buy a bottle of wine. And I mean, I remember the first time I saw Great Wealth, I was with an organization. It was fantastic. And we had a bunch of sales reps, and our meal was $27,000. And I don't think that included the tip. And I was like, I felt like sick. I was like, are you kidding me? And I was the FNG. I was the new guy. So they're like, give him the bill. I'm like, I'm going to get fired. Oh, no. I just started. I'm like, dude, heck no. I'm like, I'm not putting this on my first expense report. But I still have a hard time. I mean, if you have great wealth like that, you can enjoy it. But like you said, somebody giving $1,000 when they're that wealthy is really not a token. And then to have the pride to say, look how great I am, and tell people, that's just shameful. That's not.
Yeah. Let me tell you how I feel about wine. When people, I have been to those dinners where the dinner bill came out to, $25,000, $30,000, but fortunately I didn't pay for it. I was like a guest.
Yeah.
But when it comes to wine, they'll ask me, oh, pick out a wine. I just tell people, if it's not a school top or whatever, I mean, I'm okay. Don't waste great wine on me because I'm gonna like not even appreciate or enjoy it because I don't understand it, and there's nothing there that actually would be worth that kind of money to me. But if you're fearful, about anything, whether you want to leave an abusive relationship, when I mean like sometimes families can be pretty bad, your boss or whoever, a job. If you're fearful about anything, remember what the word fear actually means. It's false evidence appearing real. So a lot of times you look around and you think, oh, if I leave this relationship, this will happen to me because I saw other people who did what I'm thinking of doing and they all failed. Well, that's false evidence appearing real. They didn't fail because of that. They fell for other reasons. So just remember that. And, I just want to really empower everybody that, everything is possible, but you got to do the work and you got to do the hard work, the emotional part of that.
Yeah, 100%. You do your best at that time, accept your best, and God will help you. He'll help you keep growing, but you can't sit there and expect it to just happen. It takes
You're
effort.
not entitled. You're not entitled to just get it.
Yep. All right. So where is Victoria today? Tell us about your life today, where you're going, and how we can help you get there. You've given us so much value. You've given us so much great content. How can we help you now move to the next level?
So I truly believe that I've been a good person. I've tried to live a good life. I have never been like, claim that I'm perfect or anything like that. But that's that's what I strive to be. And I still have a lot of work to do on that, and I'm going to. But right now, I'm not really. So I left HSN after 20 years. Basically, it's when my contract was over. I chose not to renew that.
And for those who don't know, Home Shopping Network. That's a massive entity.
Yeah, it's like a $3.5 billion company. And I was on it monthly for 20 years now. And so left there with the intention of retiring completely from the TV world. And I wanted to, because I believe my journey was, I never thought I never looked for money. When I left my company to start my own little company, I just wanted to make $3,000 a month so I could work 20 hours a week and spend time with my family. So all the money that came after that was just kind of an aftermath. So like I said earlier in a previous segment, there were so many divinely aligned moments, divinely aligned events that happened to me that I felt like, I did a lot of the right things. I struggled and literally there were just times when I was tested left and right. But at the end, I felt like I was darn lucky too. Luck was hugely involved in there. I want to now spend my life, the rest of my life, building a legacy. And I'm not saying I'm Oprah or, anybody like that. I just want to, in my own world, impact how I can help other people to realize their dreams. Maybe maybe a lot of people won't do the $1 million. Maybe a lot of people won't have a 35-year marriage or whatever, but you're going to be better off I hope to be impactful in everyone's lives that I touch from this point forward. And also I want to create, a lot of, and the reason why I said earlier, why I believe everyone should start a business is this. I looked back about what would have happened if I didn't start a business. I might have gotten pretty, I'm pretty sure I would have gotten higher up in the corporate world or doing whatever. But by having started my own business, there are over 10 million women who have their dream jewelry at affordable prices, because that was my thing, affordable prices, premium quality jewelry. So you can actually impact your world faster in a positive way because you are giving all of you, not what your boss says, this part of you is what we want from you. So, start something small, and even if it's a side hustle, because you can impact your world, your circle of people, and then bigger, circle and bigger circle. So what I'm doing now is I started coaching a lot of entrepreneur women who have the right set of values, who understand, who have a desire to be an entrepreneur. And if they just need a little help, I help them. They can, I do a monthly seminar on how to get visible, because a lot of small businesses, the first reason they go out of business is underfunding. And the second biggest reason is not being visible. So, if you're a small bakery and everybody loves Dave's Bakery and everybody says, my God, you got to try out Dave's croissant. It's like the best thing ever. But if nobody knows that David actually has a croissant shop, on a certain corner, they're not going to find you. Right. So getting visible is a huge thing. And I actually teach free seminars once a month. And I tried one a couple of weeks ago, and I had so many signups that I felt like I couldn't answer all the questions that they asked. Like there were 350 people signed up on the first day. So I am limiting those seminars now to like 40 people once a month, so I can actually listen to and answer a question perfect, to their full extent. So it covers how they get a free PR, what they do on social media, the right kind of messages, how to get other PR such as like podcasting and so forth, and then how to author your own book, because I've authored 2 different books now. So, and the free PR thing is really important because you can get that very easily, like something that's not going to cost you a fortune. I don't have a package to sell you on that or anything like that. You should be able to get free PR. But if you actually have a real expertise and if you have real stories that people actually want to connect to, free PR is very accessible nowadays. So they can, come in and connect with me. If you've listened to the last, hour and a half with Dave and me, just come and sign up for anything. And then, I also do a 15-minute free call. If I just did a couple of them yesterday, really interesting people. And if it's a quick fix type thing, I'm pretty good at assessing, your entrepreneurship, like, you're finding your biggest idea, with the biggest opportunity and how you get there. And I'm pretty good at giving you that pretty quickly. So, and if you need a follow-up, call or something like that, I also do that too.
And I'll put links in the show notes, but what's the website or best way for people to reach you? And is there a promo code you want them to use?
Yeah. So it's www.victoriawiec.com. So that's where everything is. And then I also host a $1 Million Hobbies podcast, and you can listen to that. And there I have amazing journeys, a lot like mine, where people have started like very unlikely hobby, and they've all done, over $1 million with their little hobby and with no money, very similar stories. And I kind of focus on that because, you take, I have a photographer who was kind of called a rebel, a lost cause, and she was making no money as a photographer. And she ended up working at like a magazine company where she was dealing with photographers. But make a long story short, she ended up creating a small company of her own out of necessity because nobody would hire her. And she ended up selling her company to none other than Bill Gates himself. So, for some mega bucks. There's all these stories. I've got 30 episodes, and most of them are stories kind of like that, where people are just literally, and I love that. I love that transformation story. So I do that. And then, so people can come to milliondollarhobbies.com on Apple Podcasts and all the other stuff, and come to victoriawieck.com. You can sign up for my book. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my book. The $1 Million Hobbies book actually it's my life's work. And I'm going to tell you right now, if I was just after money, it'd be so much easier for me to do 1 or 2 extra hours on TV, because I make really good money doing that. Selling a book for like under $10 would just be a really stupid idea, because, it took me like more than a year to actually write the book and all that. But I want to impact, as many people as I can. And I have to charge something because the publishers and everybody wants to make money. But it is going to be a real eye-opening thing for you, that you should be able to literally start a business with no money and scale it up to however you want it to be, and in any business. And I got case studies and all that stuff. So my journey now is to educate and impact people. And ultimately, I'm going to create 1 million millionaires. And I say that millionaires, not necessarily money, but in their total life, meaning all the 5 different factors that I talked about. in terms of the relationships, quality of time with your family, doing what you love, all those things.
So we'll put we'll put links in the show notes to your website, the coaching program, the podcast, the $1 Million Hobby podcast, and the $1 Million Hobby book. So whether you're watching or listening, check out the show notes, whether it's on YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever podcast player you listen to, and check those links out. Victoria, it's been fantastic having you here today. Is there anything else we missed or didn't cover that you want to touch on or leave as a parting thought for our community?
Well, the parting thought is every one of you have a gift. Life is a gift. Every one of you is a gift, and it's never too late to start on the right path. So I have been told that my story is very, very inspiring, that I am an inspiring speaker. People have told me that, but I don't want to hear that. What I want to hear is that I want to be an action-oriented person. I want to leave you with the real belief that every journey, the 1,000-mile journey starts with the very first step. And today is a fine day for you to start that first step. And that first step is, maybe you just maybe if nothing else, you had redefined your dream, that, your dream life, actually, you could have more than just money. Money, like I said, is the easiest thing. So start your action today. It could be just writing down your mission. And I think about this too, write down your mission, like what were you born to do? If money was absolutely no worry to you, if you didn't have to worry about paying bills, you didn't have to do anything at all, and money was a non-issue, what would you do with your time? Because I think that's where you start. You got to pretty much figure out why you were born on this earth, and not, don't, because the bills and all this stuff, you're going to be able to pay it. Trust me on this. You will be able to pay it. You were born on this earth for a reason, and go find that reason and live that purposeful life.
Amen to that. And what I'll do is, did you ever watch that video? I think it was by Alan Watts, and it's what if money wasn't important?
Money isn't important.
No. But did you ever see his
I didn't see it, but I should.
Oh, I'll send it to you. It's a beautiful reminder for us all. And it's such good truth. Everybody, in school, we should be playing this for our kids and I have played it for my kids, but I mean, it should just be part of the curriculum. But thank you for all the wisdom and knowledge and understanding you've shared with us today, Victoria. You truly are a remarkable woman, and I hope our audience can reach out and connect with you. And if there's anything we can do for you, please stay in touch and let us know how we can help you as well.
We will. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak about my journey, because hopefully it'll impact a few people. I hope, as many as I can. And we should definitely have a, dialogue afterwards, because I believe every connection too is a divine alignment. So, I accept everybody who comes to my life as a gift, and you are certainly an amazing gift.
Well, thank you very much. And I feel the same way. And hopefully soon we'll be able to get together and break bread, not a $30,000 meal, but a nice meal.
Exactly.
All right. So I'm David Pasqualone. You just had the privilege of listening to Victoria Wieck. We love you. And all the things Victoria said, all the things her dad taught her, all the things God taught us all, nothing counts if you don't apply it. Like Victoria said, be action oriented. So our slogan is listen, do, repeat for life, so you can have a great life in this world and an eternity to come. So connect with Victoria. Let me know if I can help you. And until next week, I'm David Pasqualone. This is the Remarkable People Podcast. And Victoria, thank you again. You truly are a remarkable person.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next week. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat for life.